It's a bitter confession from the British press, a confession that's now echoing across Europe's corridors of power. According to the Times of London, Ukraine may not last until spring. The war that once united the West is now tearing it apart as the economic, political, and human costs mount higher than ever before. The article, titled Kyiv Will Not Last Until Spring, penned by veteran columnist Roger Boyce, paints a grim picture, not just for Ukraine, but for the future of Europe itself. Welcome back to TFI Global. Let's start with the first and most pressing reality. Europe is running out of money. Despite the fiery rhetoric from Brussels and the endless promises of support until victory, the financial willpower of the European Union is crumbling. The 150 billion euros in frozen Russian assets, once touted as Ukraine's economic lifeline, remain locked in legal and political limbo. Only a fraction, about 3 billion euros a year, actually reaches Kyiv. Belgium, which holds most of these assets through Euroclear, has refused to take the risk of transferring them, fearing endless litigation and financial fallout. The result? A paralyzed Europe drowning in debate while Kyiv's war machine runs dangerously low on cash, fuel, and hope. But money isn't Ukraine's only problem. It's running out of soldiers. Over 100,000 military-age Ukrainians have reportedly fled the country this year alone. Many are unwilling to return, fearing forced conscription and chaotic frontline conditions. Videos and testimonies from across Europe tell stories of desperate men hiding, bribing, or even self-harming to avoid being sent back to war. What once was a patriotic mobilization has turned into a grim lottery, one where the unlucky are sent to the front with minimal training against a Russian army that's growing stronger by the month. The third major factor comes from inside the European Union itself, the rise of the anti-European Union anti-war bloc led by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. This emerging alliance, including Hungary, Slovakia, and a growing faction within the Czech Republic and Austria, is openly blocking further aid to Ukraine. They argue that the war has already destabilized Europe's economy, spiked inflation, and created energy insecurity that benefits only the United States and global arms manufacturers. Orban's message is simple: stop the madness before Europe collapses with Ukraine. And he's not alone. Across the continent, far-right and nationalist parties are gaining ground, from Germany's AfD to France's National Rally, all demanding an end to what they call a war of attrition with no exit plan. And then there's the fourth and perhaps decisive factor, the Russian winter assault. Moscow has already mobilized over 350,000 new contract soldiers for 2025, many of whom are now completing intensive training cycles. Their mission? To launch a coordinated winter offensive aimed at breaking Ukraine's fortress belt in the east, the last major line of defense before the heartland of Ukraine opens up. Analysts predict that if these defenses collapse, Russian troops could move deep into central Ukraine by spring. And with Ukraine's power grid already battered, fuel reserves thin, and Western aid pipelines drying up, the chances of Kyiv surviving such an assault look increasingly slim. The mood in Western capitals has shifted dramatically. A year ago, leaders in Washington, London, and Brussels spoke confidently of defending democracy and defeating Putin. Today, the same voices sound wary, uncertain, and divided. American and European sanctions against Russian energy giants like Rosneft and Lukoil have done little to change Moscow's calculus. In fact, Russian oil prices have risen and alternative trading networks are flourishing across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. As the Time notes, every new sanction only seems to strengthen Russia's economic resilience while draining Europe's own coffers. The once unbreakable Western unity is now little more than a slogan. So, what happens next? Ukraine's 2025 defense budget stands at nearly $71 billion, but its projected revenues are only $68 billion, an unsustainable deficit for a war-torn economy. European taxpayers are reaching their limits. Governments fear public backlash, especially as energy costs rise again and inflation bites into living standards. And then there's fatigue, political, economic, and moral fatigue. As the Times writer concludes, Ukraine can only sustain itself until the end of the first quarter next year. In plain words, unless something extraordinary happens, Kyiv could collapse before spring. In a last-ditch effort to level the battlefield, Ukraine has intensified drone and missile strikes on Russian oil facilities, hoping to inflict the same cold and chaos on Russian cities that it now faces. But Moscow's retaliation will be ruthless. The Kremlin's strategy is clear: destroy Ukraine's power grid, cripple transport, and break public morale before launching the final push. As temperatures drop, the humanitarian crisis will deepen, and with each blackout, Zelensky's grip on power weakens. In Eastern Europe, they say winter decides wars. And as the frost sets in, the question is no longer if Ukraine will fall, but when. Roger Boy's warning in the Times may be hard to hear, but it reflects an undeniable truth. The world's attention is drifting, Europe's unity is cracking, and Kyiv's time may be running out. Spring this time might not bring renewal, but reckoning. Thanks for watching.